Hi everyone. In this lesson, we are going to sketch out ideas for how to make a 3D printable Minecraft character. Now, I can take a look at some pictures of Minecraft characters, but really, we can see that from Minecraft, all we need are boxes. There's a lot of ways that we might be able to change and pose our characters, but the basics of them is going to be made out of just one shape. We can think of a standard cube that's the same on all sides for the head of our character, and then rectangular, longer and flatter cubes we use to make the body, the arms, and the legs. The key to making this 3D printable is to put it in a pose that will actually be connected to each other. If we touch our boxes to just the corners of each other, then they might be easy to break apart after it's been printed. So we're going to have to design our poses so that we can either print our design lying down on the ground or standing up in a way where his limbs will not just fall right off onto the floor. So next time, we'll take a look at how we can do a variety of things to make our characters out of boxes, or even add other details to them, and even create shapes that we could use to add tools to them. We are going to be designing ourselves some Minecraft characters. We'll start by making the simplest design to print using some overlapping boxes. Let's move all of our examples out of the way, and let's get started from the beginning. And we'll have a view of our empty work plane here, and we'll bring in the only shape that we will need for this entire project, the box. By default, the box is 20 millimeters on each side, so it's a cube. We can go ahead and duplicate this box, or drag in new ones to make the rest of our parts. Since we're going to change our shape here to make a flatter box that we'll use as our arms, legs, and body, I'm going to duplicate that one and use it to make some identical shapes. So let's go ahead and click on duplicate and repeat, which is going to make us a second box here that's in the same spot as the first one. I'm going to undo that move so it's right there. And we're going to stretch it out so the body is twice as long as the head. I can do that by dragging this from 20 all the way until it is 40. Or I could click on my measurement here and type it in so it can be exactly 40. Then I'm going to make the body half as thick as the head is. So let's click on our height measurement here, and we'll go all the way down to 10. Now we just have to move our body downwards. I'll use the arrow keys to just move this down so it sticks out, and we can see that it's twice as long as the head. This might look like a little bit long for our character's proportions. I'm going to take a look at Minecraft characters and see that the head is only a little bit longer than, or the body's only a little bit longer than the head. This gives them the really big head, fun, cartoony appearance. So let's head back here and change this from 40 to 30. Now we've got a body that looks more like the proportions of our Minecraft character. His arms and legs are about the same size as the body. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. And we'll drag our extra body over to the side here. Just line that up. And we'll make it 10 millimeters wide. And now we've got this shape the same height as it is wide, 10 by 10. Make it a nice square shape so it's not stretched in any direction. Now if I click on duplicate here, it's going to make me an even smaller version of itself. I don't want to do that. When I click on an empty space, click on my new arm and duplicate it. Let's move it over to the other side. We'll duplicate it again. Pick this one and make it a leg. If I click on this and duplicate it a last time, I can move it over and make it the second leg. So far, so good. It looks like we have a nice Minecraft character here, lying down. But at this point, if I were to select everything and click on the group, all of my shapes are exactly 10 millimeters tall, which means that the entire body and arms and legs are all going to look like just one large piece. Look at this from the side, and it hardly even looks like a character, maybe some buildings. So let's go ahead and move the arms and legs so that we can get it into a position where we can see the difference between them. I'm going to ungroup this, and I'll take a look at this arm first. Let's go ahead and select all of these guys and change them to white, just to make it a little easier to look at. That red is a little difficult. So I'll click on this arm and go down here to our rotate handle. And I only want to rotate this out just a little tiny bit. Let's go ahead and do 4 or 5, 6. It doesn't really matter. We just want it to tilt out just a little bit. And we can see that right now it overlaps just a little bit at the top. That's exactly what we want. If I were to move this out so that the corner touched, we might be able to print this like it's one piece, but this joint here would be so thin, it would be very easy to break his arm off after printing. So let's move it in at least a millimeter there, so that we have a large area that connects. That way our finished piece won't break apart. At this point I could duplicate and use our flip trick to make an arm on the other side that's exactly identical. But since I have this arm here, I'm going to go ahead and just rotate him in the other direction. Now if I want this arm to be a little more different, have him have some kind of a pose, you could stick one arm up in the air and just stick the corner into his body so that it'll be part of it. And lastly, we need to move his legs. And if we want him to be standing straight up, with his legs out flat, we're going to need a little bit of, tiny bit of space in between the two legs so we can actually see this line, so it looks like two different shapes instead of one. If I move one of these guys 1 millimeter to the side, we'll have a 1 millimeter gap right in between his two legs. Now if I zoom out, I can select all of this, group it together, and now we can tell that he's a figure. He's got one arm up, one arm down, and two separate legs. At this point, you could very easily print this guy to make your own Minecraft figure and just paint all of the details that you want on him. Might be a little bit difficult to get the details, especially since everything in Minecraft has those nice blocky edges to it. So we can go ahead and add the things that we want our character have, maybe hair or a helmet or something, and make them out of boxes as well. Let's go ahead and start a new guy, and we'll quickly make all of the pieces that we need for him. A head, and a body. I'm going to move this down to 10 and 30. Oops. Let's type it in. That'll be easier. And an arm and a leg. So I'll duplicate this. And we'll make this 10. I'll click on an empty space. We'll click on this arm again. Duplicate it to make a leg. Now I've got all the pieces I need. I've only made one arm and one leg because I'm not sure if I want them to be the same on both sides or not. So let's create some gear. We'll make all of these white just to start with. I'll click on the arm here and duplicate it. Then I can stretch this out and up to make a shape so that it looks like he's got some kind of a sleeve. And on his feet, I think I will duplicate this one and give him some kind of boots. Now for the shirt, duplicate this body, make it a little shorter, a little taller. Maybe out just 1 millimeter to each side. And just to show that these are different, I will change their color. Keep in mind that the color is only for us to tell what's what in Tinkercad, as the printer is going to print it in all on plastic, and we'll have to color or paint these separately afterwards. Looks like he needs a color for his pants. All right, and we will give him some kind of hair. Let's duplicate our head here. And we'll move it up a little bit and make it just 1 millimeter bigger on each side. Right now, it's covering up his whole face area. So let's get rid of the part of the hair. We'll make it some red hair. Let's get rid of the part of the hair that would cover up his face. We'll go up here to take the box that's already set to whole and move it into position to cut off the area of hair that we don't want. I'll raise this up with my up and down arrow, and we'll stretch it out. We can see that where it intersects is shaded, so we can see that this part of the hair is inside of our hole. Now I don't want to cut out this hole from his head and remove all of it. I only want to remove the hair. So let's hold down Shift and click on our hair shape, and then click Group. And there we go. Now we have a box with a hole cut in it, so you can paint on a face. We can also use holes to make other details. We could add the face in this way. Go ahead and give this guy some eyes and a mouth by making some tiny little holes. We want to make sure that we don't cut this hole all the way through his head. So we're going to use our up and down arrow to just cut it out of the surface. And I can duplicate this and use my arrow keys to move it to the right. So I've got two identical sized eyes. I'll duplicate it again and move this one over here to make a mouth. All right. Now we've got all the parts, we're ready to assemble this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of the parts of the head and group them together. And I can click on multicolor here so I can still see the color I chose for the hair. And I can do the same thing with all of my different limbs. So if I've added a whole lot of different details to this, or cut out some different interesting holes, I can group them all together. And group, and multicolor. Now that each of these is a separate group, I can go ahead and place them where I want his limbs to be. I'll duplicate this leg, move it over to the side, and then I'll put our arm on here, duplicate it, move it over to the other side. Now I can see my arm isn't symmetrical, so I can go ahead and use the mirror tool to flip it in this direction, stick it on the other side. And we'll attach his head. And I can see we've got a little bit of a problem here. If I put these together, we're going to have the same issue where our legs are right there, the exact same width as the body. Another way we can fix this is we could select our body shape and we could make it 1 millimeter wider. So we have just enough space to put the leg off to the side. Now we have a little gap to separate the two legs. We still got those shoes. We could also separate our legs by rotating them. So just like I turned our arm up and down, our previous one, we can go ahead and rotate this. And then we'll hit D for drop, because when I rotate it, you can see that part of it has stuck underneath the floor. So I'm going to hit the D key to put the bottom edge of my leg right on the floor. Now I've got one leg sticking out, so it looks like he's walking, and he's still very easy to print. Once you have all the details for your character, we can decide if we just want him to stand up, or if we want to use him as a keychain, or attach him to something else. If we're going to hang him from something, we'll need to add a tube to his head. That way, he'll have something to hang from. Once all of our pieces are in place, we need to select everything at once and group them together. At this point, we can double check to make sure that all of our shapes overlap enough that they'll be printed as one solid, and that we have the gaps that we want to see that his arms are separate. I can see here that in the back of his leg is a little bit of a problem. It doesn't look that great, so I could move his leg up and close that gap. So let's go ahead and ungroup. And I'll click on the leg, and we'll just use the arrow keys to move it up 1 millimeter. Oops, let's not select everyone. Let's go just this figure. We'll group it together. And now we can see he's joined even at the back. There's a little bit of a line there, but we won't see that at the end. The colors can sometimes look weird because you have shapes that match up with each other. But keep in mind these are only for reference, so you know what you wanted to color it when you're finished. And lastly, if we wanted to create a shape to attach to his hand, we'll need to make our tool and use it to cut a hole in his arm so that we can add it to his hand later. We'll go ahead and make ourselves a tool. Remember that this has got to be smaller than our 10 millimeter arm so that it will fit inside of it. So I'm going to make this box 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters. This can be our handle. And then we will make our little pickaxe. So we'll go ahead and duplicate this box. And in this case, I think we'll just make it standing up. I'll duplicate it again. Whoops. Remember that duplicate and repeat is going to add the same effect that you did last time, and it's going to scale up the amount I did. I made it a lot taller here, so let's delete that. Select this again, I'll duplicate it, I'll move it up and over a bit. There we go. Just so we have something a little bit of a pickaxe shape. This doesn't look much like a pickaxe right now, but we're going to use there we go. We're going to move this into the middle here. We'll duplicate this one, move it all the way down to the other side. And now if we change our colors, we'll make this part gray and this part brown. Yeah, we can kind of see what we're trying to look like. Now that we've created a tool of some kind, we're going to select it, group it together, and I'll just turn on the colors again. And I definitely should have made this lying down. Since I pushed it into the floor, we're not going to be able to print it this way. Let's go ahead and rotate our tool 90 degrees by keeping it inside of the circle here. Oops, inside, there we go. So now it's lying on the floor, we should be able to print it. We won't be able to attach it to his hand though, unless we make ourselves a hole. We know from when we made this that this was a 5 millimeter by 5 millimeter cube. So we could create a hole that was exactly that size, or we can make a duplicate of this tool and put it exactly where we want him to hold it. Let's go ahead and rotate our tool up. And let's put it in his hand. There we go. That looks about right. Now that we have it where we want it, I'm going to take my duplicate tool here, turn it into a hole, and we'll group it together with our figure. So now I've cut out a hole in his hand that we can put our tool in after we finish printing. We're going to take our Minecraft character with his pickaxe and set him up to print. So, even though I have two separate objects that are not grouped together, I'm going to place them close to each other without touching to make sure that they don't get printed as one solid piece. And then I'm going to drag a box around the two of them before I select Export. So we can see that I'm going to include only the two selected shapes. So my other examples won't be included in this STL file, but the two different shapes that I have will all go into one single file. Let's click on this, and it'll create us an STL with the same name as our Tinkercad design. Let's go over to Cura and see how we're going to slice it. Because both of my shapes were lying on the floor and very close to each other, we shouldn't have any problems loading our STL file. You can see that it's going to treat these two shapes like they're one single object, even though there's still a gap of space between them. So once we print them, they'll be separate, but in the slicer, they are treated like they are the same object, which means that I can't separate and move this pickaxe around. If I decide I want it to be on the other side of him for some reason, or standing up, or I want to print it in a different way, then I will have to go back into Tinkercad and download them separately. Now, we can always select each object and export them as two separate objects. If we were able to do that, then back in Cura, I would be able to open my second object and position it wherever I wanted to place it. It would be a separate piece. We still have to make sure that we don't have them touching, otherwise we're going to have a guy with a pickaxe sticking out of his arm. But this would let you arrange pieces so that you could print multiples of things as long as they're not touching. In this case, I only want one of these pickaxes, so I'm going to delete this guy. And we're going to slice him and see how he does with our default settings. We designed our figure to be lying on the ground, so if I look from below, you can see that this is blue. But interestingly, this one is red, which means that it looks like I have something to go back in Tinkercad and fix. Since red means that it's not touching the ground, I can just see that it is barely above the surface. So it looks like I made a mistake when I was creating, most likely because I had to rotate it and move it around. So if I preview this, and we take a look at our first layer, we'll see there's nothing on the floor for our pickaxe. And all of the surface that lies on the floor for this guy is going to be printed as the first layer. And as we go up, on layer number 2, we'll see the pickaxe gets drawn. Nope, layer number 3. There we go. And that means that we're going to be about 0.5 millimeter up in the air before we start printing the pickaxe. So it's not going to stick to the floor. And this plastic's just going to move around and it's going to make a mess. So it's always a good idea to double check and make sure that your files are printable. So let's go back into Tinkercad and take a look at our pickaxe file. We can see that he's just 1 millimeter up off the ground, so I'll have to hit D on the keyboard to drop it on the floor. If I raised it up and down, I'd be able to see this 1 millimeter gap there, and I can always click on this and change it to 0 to make sure that it's on the floor. Now that we know our problems are fixed, let's go ahead, select these guys, and export them one more time. To make sure I have only the selected shapes, the STL file. Right now, it's adding a new file with the same name and a number each time. So I can take a look at that. We'll go back into Prepare. We'll delete our problem figure and open up the newest one, number 2. Let's scroll down to the bottom. We can see that the pickaxe, the bottom side, is blue. So now everything is touching the floor here, which means that we don't need to worry about supports, except for this leg. Even though the printer is going to print this leg attached to the body, it's going to be going out into the air here, and some of it could be drooping down before it actually cools. So we're going to want supports in that one area. So I'll just check the box for supports and hit slice and see what our default settings does. We'll click on the preview, and we're already looking at layer 1, since that's what I was doing before. We can see that we've got this blue bottom support printed. So as we go up, there's going to be support printed right underneath the leg. And once we finish, we'll be able to break off the little support tower. Everything else will be done. Now that he's looking good, we can save the file. And we have our G code ready to send to print.